Hey guys, this is Comic Legend here. As my gameplay videos have shown, I'm a bit of an Arkham fan. I've played many hours upon hours of the Arkham games, Arkham Asylum especially. I've played through this game many times and spent hours experimenting with the stealth and combat mechanics. That's why when I watched Whitelight's video on the game, I decided to respond to it as a fan of the game and Batman in general. Before I start with the response, I want to discuss my thoughts on Whitelight as a YouTube creator. I would describe him as a mixed bag. He can make an incredible analysis or confusing mess. He has a habit of saying things that either don't make sense or are worded rather poorly. Thankfully, this isn't a problem in this particular video, as the way he talks about the atmosphere and design of the Asylum is very well scripted, which is one of the reasons I'll still recommend his channel to people. He has amazing scripts, for the most part, and line delivery, and his descriptions are wonderful. I'm actually still subscribed to his channel because I ultimately think the good outweighs the bad. The videos of his that I'd recommend, which will be in the description, is his Avengers video, both Watch Dogs videos, and his Assassin's Creed Syndicate video. I won't be going through the entire video right here, and will skip two sections I strongly disagree with. So if you want to see the entire video, it'll also be in the description. Now, with all of that said, on to the response.
And then sprinkle in some tough realism the mass market associated with Batman after the Dark Knight blew the world's collective mind.
I don't find too much of a problem with this point, but I find it strange to describe the Arkham games as realistic. Grounded in dark, yes, but definitely not realistic. The game is about the Joker taking over a gothic asylum that looks like it was ripped straight out of a horror game, where a doctor creates a magic juice that turns people into Chungus monsters. Batman has to fight a giant crocodile man, a plant lady, and a guy who uses fear toxin. Again, not a big problem, but it's a weird thing to say, that this game is realistic.
So, come to Arkham West, and enter the penitentiary, swarms of beasts locked in claustrophobic cages, their screams drowning out all but the oppressive music. The inspiration for this place came from a single question. What if Twitter was a place?
Yes.
Backtracking sounds like a bore. Doesn't play like one though. It may miss its potential, as we'll come to see. But despite the inevitably repetitive nature of traversing the Asylum time and time again, Rocksteady reflect the state of the story in the Asylum itself. Announcements from the Joker continually entertain, but nothing is predictable as the stakes raise from fists to guns to Redditors all the way up to snipers and plants that completely change how you tackle the journey. You thought you were the only one who could learn the strength to escape Jeffrey Jokestein's private island, and now I'm gonna tell everyone who was on his flight log.
Okay, so you say that going to places and backtracking is repetitive, but then talk about thugs, plants, and snipers that keep it from being repetitive. How does that work? You yourself say that these things change the journey, so is traveling the Asylum repetitive or not? If you mean after the story, then fine, but even then you can still go around collecting Riddler trophies, and if you 100% the game, then I recommend you play the challenge maps, because most games like this usually don't have a reason to continue going through the open world at this point. Games like Assassin's Creed would be a good example of this.
Trouble is, where Eagle Vision has some level of beauty to it, Detective Mode reduces the Asylum from a painting to a programming window. Would you rather look at this or this? It claws at the soul of the game.
Okay, if you want to enjoy the atmosphere, just turn on Detective Mode only when you need it, like in Stealth or when you're following a trail. Also, the idea of Batman sacrificing beauty to look analytically helps with the immersion. The idea of Detective Mode is completely different than Eagle Vision. Eagle Vision is trying to be very artful because that's how the Assassin's Creed games wants to present it. Detective Mode is supposed to be a tactical vision that helps you with goal-oriented tasks in the gameplay, where Eagle Vision barely even gives you information about where the enemies are unless you play later games. Usually you have to rely on the minimap.
And it smites half the reason you have to explore it. Oh, it'll make finding everything easier. But isn't part of the joy of exploration seeing it too? Uninterrupted. Often in games, very little can be interacted with, and yet exploration that requires both interaction and uncertainty is encouraged all the same. Visual consistencies are the obvious choice to keep you on the right track, but that comes with its artistic disadvantages. Why is every climbable surface painted white? When there are only some such color in Detective Mode, you avoid the problem, ironic as that may be. But after having secured believable visual coherency, Detective Mode makes it pointless by covering it up.
Exploration in the Asylum is a lot more than finding a weak wall or a vent cover. For example, when you're looking for the warden, there are a lot of paths you have to look around to find where he is at, which requires you to go through doors, find different locations, look around different hallways. All this stuff cannot be solved or easily remedied by detective mode exactly. The only things that detective mode really helps is basic interactables, something that most games highlight anyways. It just makes it more immersive, something you literally admit later in this section. It's ridiculous to say that finding the interactive parts being easier ruins exploration when every video game gives you a way to distinguish what you can and can't interact with. Detective mode just gives you a more immersive way to find interactable things in a level. I don't see the problem with this at all.
So why is it here at all? Well, you'll surely have to ask the same question of Tomb Raider, Shadow of Mordor, and Witcher 3, just to name a few. The answer is the same every time. It's an accelerant. Finding a trail of hooves or cigarette breath is unlikely to create interesting choices within any pre-existing gameplay system, and so, free of the frustrations of a forced animation or cutscene, the process is skipped, believably contextualized by a character's skill, supernatural ability, or technology. Detective mode was a first in that sense, but it was only following Eagle Vision's footsteps to apply the same accelerationism to stealth.
So you know that other games make it obvious what is and isn't interactable, so why is detective mode a bad thing? Also, technically you don't need detective mode to spot the weak walls or covers, because they have a very distinct visual design on their own anyways. The only reason why you want to use detective mode is because of the visual consistency of the world, which is something you praise the game for. So what makes this mechanic pointless exactly?
You can't extrapolate a representative experience from the top 1% of instances, and nothing's going to change the fact that gargoyles, inverted takedowns, and silent killing stragglers are the least risky, and yet most effective strategies. Low risk, high reward. The formula for an easy exploit.
Alright, I'm going to show timed gameplay of myself on a stealth challenge map in Arkham Asylum. One time playing how Whitelight suggested, which is only using stealth takedowns, glide kicks, and inverted takedowns. The second would be using only complex strategies and plans to determine which one is faster and which one is more riskier.
My crew is searching Arkham Asylum for you, Batman. I won't stop till you're dead. Or they are.
Show yourself. Is this your bat cave? Come on, Bat. You...
Is someone missing? I keep losing count.
You heard the boss! Oh, God, no. We've got another one down over here! What happened to you? Doing this! What's going on? Shut up and keep looking! Batman? Can you hear me? Show yourself! Wait up! I'll watch your back!
Batman's taken out one of your crew. Did you even notice?
You heard the boss! Get over here, everyone! On me! What are you doing? Ah! Come on! Knock me down! Anyone got a plan? We gotta find him and work that. You hear me? We'll come back when the bat is dead. Oh God! I found someone over here! Is anyone gonna help me? Hello? I need...
Did I tell you I was going to kill each henchman who failed to beat you? No. Let's see if you've still got the moves, bats. Don't be scared. The massive poisonous plants have probably stopped with that by now. And if not, you're just the guys to do it.
How'd I get into this? Someone help me! Ooh, I'm going over here! Wake up! Him! He's in cold! Leave him here! Run out and find that bat!
Nice moves, Bats. Thanks for showing me them.
So, doing only what Whitelight suggested landed me on a time of 2 minutes and 12 seconds, and even then it was a little shorter than it should have been as I lost my patience and cheated using a batarang at the end. When I decided to use more complex strategies, I got 1 minute and 36 seconds, which is not only far less time, it isn't even my fastest. In a previous video of mine, I got 31 seconds.
My crew is searching Arkham Asylum for you, Batman. I won't stop till you're dead. Or they are. Bugs like that for breakfast.
But that's not all. I still need to determine which route is riskier. When I calculated the amount of time I was at risk of detection, the safe run clocked in at 35 seconds and the complex run at 43 seconds. I also checked the amount of time I was doing anything of use. The safe run got 56 seconds, and the planning run had no such stretch of time. So how is it the most effective strategy to only utilize silent takedowns, glide kicks, and the inverted takedowns, when it's much slower and wastes way more time? Another thing of note is when I was using complex plans, I was easily more in control of the room and had less enemies sticking together, which makes it far easier to take down enemies in a much quicker rate. The argument of playing it safe instead of making more complex plans is flawed because this logic can be applied to virtually every video game with a combat or stealth system. For example, in a game you like, Spider-Man Web of Shadows, you can beat most if not all fights using exclusively the web strike, which is much safer but is quite slow and extremely boring. Hey, do you guys remember when Under the Mayo literally used the same argument against Ultra Kill? Oh, you could just use the pistol instead of using the variety of other options to make the combat go faster? This is basically the exact same logic here. A question I have for you would be to also name a stealth game where it is impossible to do only the basic stealth takedowns, because even a game like Assassin's Creed Unity can be beat with spamming smoke bombs and hidden blades, a game you called underrated, by the way.
Assassin's Creed Unity is underrated.
Another thing, besides some of the most useful takedowns in the game, such as using the bat claw to pull enemies off railings, something you could do 3 at a time in Arkham Asylum especially, and the fact you have to get off gargoyles to set up explosive gel traps, keep in mind these things can take out way more than one target, unlike silent takedowns, glide kicks, or inverted takedowns off gargoyles. You yourself has even said that explosive gel is a really useful plan for attack. Here's the clip right here.
When everyone's huddled together, explosive gel suddenly becomes a much wiser choice. That's interesting.
I think at the end of the day, When it comes to you and analyzing stealth in Arkham Asylum, I think you're misunderstanding the difference between complex strategies, which are meant to finish up arenas much quicker and more efficiently while taking the least risk possible, versus safe, aka lame play. Going up on gargoyles and slowly doing stealth takedowns and inverted takedowns can be done, and you can beat the game this way, but not only is it way slower, even though it is safe, it is also just less efficient, less fun, and takes way too much time. Using complex strategies is rewarding because you can finish arenas much quicker than you can sitting up on gargoyles, wasting time, especially in the later half of the game where they use explosives to force you to play this way.
Around 3/4 of the way in, Joker rigs the gargoyles to blow, and following this encounter, Predator arenas start including far fewer gargoyles at a baseline. Rocksteady want you to know what they've encouraged you to miss.
The reason Rocksteady added explosive perch points is because they want to reuse an area of the Asylum while keeping stealth fresh. It's also weird that you think it somehow helps your point that Rocksteady knew how useful the gargoyles are and account for it. Doesn't that prove they can't be exploited?
Escape becomes a concept beyond pressing the grapple button.
There are so many times I've still gotten shot or detected because I chose to grapple up the gargoyle instead of using other methods of escape, like the grates.
Complex plans become worthwhile plans. That is the formula for depth. So why is it just a gimmick? When you're shimmying on the side of a railing to remain unseen like in Splinter Cell, you can only wonder how Rocksteady ever thought they could design so much but give so little reason to use it.
I've already covered this point and disproved it using gameplay. I genuinely don't think you've played enough stealth in Arkham, because the point you're making showcases a lack of understanding as to why people use more complex strategies in Arkham Asylum, or any stealth game for that matter.
Without question, gargoyle use should have been without consequence twice per encounter at most, with every time subsequently triggering the bomb. They'd be reduced to consumable resets instead of a safe space to hide from both the thugs and the depth itself.
So you want the game to take away one of the 2 reliable hiding spots in stealth encounters. Do you understand how annoying that would be? You also call it a safe space even though thugs can still shoot you while you're up there.
Items will be incorporated progressively, in shallow but novel ways, following their explosive introduction. Never could have expected Crane to whip around so suddenly. You're expected to think on your feet, and that maximizes the immersion and the tension both. Almost borders on fear. Sounds like a pretty smart way to pull off Scarecrow if you ask me. But this is just the symptom of a much larger philosophy.
You call something shallow, but you proceed to explain an instance where it did something interesting and changed the encounter. What?
Though the fight is true to Bane's character mechanically, Rocksteady's offering is too shallow to support the boss on its own. Batarang and dodge? That's all you got?
Do you know the character of Bane? Like, at all? Also, are you going to justify calling his boss shallow at all? Because having thugs in the fight alongside Bane makes it less shallow, as you have to balance avoiding Bane's charges, dodging his throw attack, and dealing with thugs, which challenges your combat and enemy prioritization skills. You need to make an argument on how the fight is shallow besides you need to throw a batarang at Bane.
You can fight like a younger gamer, with nothing held back. Admirable, but mistaken. The goal of Arkham combat is to maintain free flow, which means the goal of the designer is to challenge it.
Doesn't Bane challenge your ability to do exactly that? How is that not depth? And once again, how is Bane a shallow boss?
Bane becomes the blueprint for one of them. The Titans throw bodies, they charge you, they have a ground pound. Difference is you can mount them and direct their flailing arms into other enemies. It's exactly the extra spice that the combat needs. But I can't help but wonder, were they based off Bane? Or was Bane based off them? Just because a portrayal is faithful doesn't mean it's good.
Ignoring the fact that you never gave a reason for Bane's fight being bad, what is the problem with Bane being based off the Titan thugs?
The riddles apply to nearly every visually compelling location in the game. There are fantastic means to encourage a little thought, but also to soak in the environment itself. These are the one collectible type that Detective Mode makes harder to find, not easier.
Wasn't one of your earlier points about how there's no reason to turn off Detective Mode and how it ruins the environment and the atmosphere? But now you're giving us a very solid reason to do that exact action, turn off the Detective Mode.
Though we are talking about a man whose idea of puzzles is repeatedly having you press the same 3 buttons. Yes, the second collectible type that can be attributed to Riddler are the trophies, but the only thing they test is whether or not you have the right gadget. It doesn't take a genius to turn on detective mode. That's not a puzzle, it's a green glowing progression check.
The reason for those easier puzzles that require you to either use a gadget or just press a button to open a grate or something isn't meant to challenge you exactly. Those puzzles are meant to push you to go into exploration in the game and start backtracking. You know, one of the main core foundations of a Metroidvania game.
Because I just kind of forgot, repeating the same shallow idea over and over again spoils it.
How exactly do you make collectibles not repetitive or shallow? While there are obviously different degrees of repetitive, all collectibles are to at least a minor extent repetitive. Not only that, but collectibles aren't the main focus of Arkham Asylum. While a mechanic not being the main focus obviously isn't an excuse for poor design, I fail to see how the riddles are poorly designed, given their variety and how they engage the player.
Though Asylum can count itself lucky, because shallowness is handily countered by the lack of a point. Successful outcomes need to be worthwhile, remember. And this isn't Darksiders 3, or Jedi Fallen Order, or even Zelda, where there's a meaningful resource, upgrade, or cosmetic item behind every corner. It's Arkham Asylum, where you unlock 3D models you can't load into Honey Select, and a 30-second audio track of Riddler being arrested for doxing kids on Reddit.
Acquiring the trophies not only unlocks the challenge maps, which are replayable endgame content, they give XP which can be used to upgrade Batman for both the story and the challenge maps themselves, as well as character bios and audio tapes that you can use to learn more about the lore and history of the Batman universe. Honestly, the fact that you failed to even mention the challenge maps or upgrades comes across as really disingenuous, given that you can get not only more playable content, but content that tends to be more together than the ones in the main story themselves. The comparison you made were also rather poor. In Fallen Order, the collectibles they give you are just ponchos and lightsaber parts, nothing but just cosmetics, and the Legend of Zelda one is a massive false equivalence, which we'll get into later.
This arborous opulence is a glittering example of how Arkham Asylum only plays with being Bat Zelda, but is never willing to expand beyond its core gameplay loops. There's combat, there's stealth, but most of what you'll be doing is exploration, or better put, movement, with a contextual veneer of exploration coated on.
Do you have any proof that exploration is majority of what you'll be doing in Arkham Asylum? Because I don't remember that at all. I remember most of the game being combat and stealth, not exploration.
Because it is no less hollow than the Deku Tree itself. The underbelly feigns complexity with a no grapple rule, but all it amounts to is holding the run button to automatically jump every gap. The cryptographic sequencer feigns complexity with these new Joker booby traps on the terminals, and the word crypto, but all it boils down to is swishing around the stick to make a yellow light greener. The new line launcher doesn't even bother with the ruse. You aim and shoot. No precision, no complexity. It is nothing more or less than a requirement to traverse specific pathways. Different only from the backlore in that it has no one-off combat utility, different only from the explosive gel in the same way. Arkham's neatest trick is pretending to be a Metroidvania with gadgets, tight level design and blocking collectibles behind obstacles, but then forgetting that the gameplay it inspires is meant to be meaningful. Gadgets do not synergize with each other, only two can be used in combat. There are no puzzles. You are only expected to aim and shoot, to repeatedly press the same 2 buttons while walking along a completely linear pathway. Not boring because it's over so quickly, just crap. An hour away from the end of the game, you're met with an elevator shaft that expects you to grapple up, use the ultra backclaw to pull a wall down, then grapple up again, and repeat the process 4 times. It is the tutorial puzzle from a Zelda dungeon, there an exception to acclimatize the player to the item's nature and control. But Arkham never evolves beyond it. This is just quick-time events delaying my ascent to the top of the shaft. It doesn't matter if there's 100 jumps, weak walls, chasms, and inaccessible grates. The only meaningful difference between this and walking in a straight line is occasionally pausing to enact the same animation you've seen 1,000 times before. So my question is, what was the point? It's a tough pill to swallow. But these gadgets in Arkham Asylum are one of Crane's illusions. They exist to give you a feeling of progression, but it's all an act. And
while Asylum's exploration isn't insanely deep or anything, it obviously isn't a focus of the game. Even the trailers show the game focusing more on the combat and stealth mechanics.
There's no escape, Joker.
I don't want to escape. I'm having way too much fun.
As for the Zelda comparison, I like to put my friend Borgy Boy on the stage, as he's far more knowledgeable about the Zelda franchise in general.
Hello everyone, my name is Borgy Boy, and welcome to my section of Comic Legend's response to Whitelight's video on Batman Arkham Asylum. As Comic Legend himself isn't exactly that big of a Zelda fan, I however have a certain set of qualifications which makes me perfect for dissecting this point, since I am a fan of both the Arkham series and the Legend of Zelda series. Now, Whitelight compares Arkham to Zelda in the context of exploration, basically making the point that Arkham's exploration is shallow in comparison to the Legend of Zelda's, which I will agree is true. However, there's an issue with this, and it comes down to a very specific point: the difference between primary and secondary mechanics within video games. And to demonstrate this point, I am going to be using Shadow of the Colossus. Now, I would like to ask you all a question. What will you be doing the majority of the time within Shadow of the Colossus? The answer to that question being exploring the overworld. Whether or not that's to collect lizard tails, to go after the other colossi, or, plain and simply, to appreciate the beauty of the Forbidden Lands. However, I don't think most people would argue that this is Shadow of the Colossus' main appeal. Most people would argue that its main appeal would be fighting the colossi themselves, climbing on them and getting to their weak spots. And just because it's not the thing you do the most doesn't mean it's the game's primary mechanic. And I feel like it would be a little bit foolish for someone to make that argument for another relevant video game we are talking about today.
This arborous opulence is a glittering example of how Arkham Asylum only plays with being Bat Zelda, but is never willing to expand beyond its core gameplay loops. There's combat, there's stealth, but most of what you'll be doing is exploration, or better put, movement, with a contextual veneer of exploration coated on, because it is no less hollow than the Deku Tree itself.
Yeah, Whitelight makes this argument about Arkham. And while he doesn't say it is its primary mechanic, he does directly compare it to games where exploration is the primary mechanic, such as Zelda.
And this isn't Darksiders 3, or Jedi Fallen Order, or even Zelda, where there's a meaningful resource, upgrade, or cosmetic item behind every corner. It's Arkham Asylum, where you unlock 3D models you can't load into Honey Select, and a 30-second audio track of Riddler being arrested for doxing kids on Reddit.
It's Dolly Boy 1923, aka Pixel Donkey.
The issue with this being, Arkham Asylum's primary mechanic isn't exploration. I would argue its two primary mechanics are in fact stealth and combat. This is because these two mechanics receive the most depth and the most focus within the game, even though it's not the thing you're actually doing the most.
But is never willing to expand beyond its core gameplay loops. There's combat, there's stealth, but most of what you'll be doing is exploration.
Now, what's given the most focus within The Legend of Zelda? Now, this varies from game to game. For example, Breath of the Wild's focus is on its massive open world, but the example Whitelight uses is Ocarina of Time, and I would argue that Ocarina of Time's primary mechanic is its dungeons. Specifically the puzzles within those dungeons, and even in the overworld themselves. Hell, even the boss fights are like mini puzzles. Ocarina of Time's primary mechanic is its dungeon design, world design, and puzzles, in contrast to Arkham's primary mechanic being combat and stealth. And it wouldn't really be fair to call Zelda's combat and stealth mechanics shallow in comparison to the Arkham games, which is what they are primarily known for. So why do this the other way round? Why take a game with the secondary mechanic of exploration and then compare it to another game where exploration is its primary mechanic? it just doesn't make any sense to make that comparison. Anyways, I've had enough of Whitelight's really stupid false equivalences. Back to you, Comic Legend.
One more thing I'd like to bring up before we move on is what he said about the gadgets. Aside from the cryptographic sequencer, all of the gadgets have use in both exploration and stealth, where you can mix and match them to achieve outcomes that you can't without them in stealth in particular. Gadgets have been used for many different purposes. For example, the line launcher can be used as an introductory for combat, knocking people off railings for stealth, and for getting to other areas in exploration, for example. So the gadgets are only one note and can be used for only one thing isn't exactly accurate.
The cryptographic sequencer is used to override security panels, open new paths, or disable various Asylum functions. End quote. That's from the Wikipedia page. Anyone notice anything? Yeah. What they've done there is said the same thing in 3 different ways. That's like saying a car is used to drive, provide transport, and go places. Wow, how versatile. Not even descriptions of the game can make its gadgets look good. Why did no one question this? You'll find out.
The fact that you use the worst gadget, the cryptographic sequencer, as the example for gadgets comes across as extremely disingenuous. What about examples like the bat claw, which can be used in combat to pull enemies out of range of other enemies, can be used in stealth to pull enemies off railings for free stealth takedowns, and can be used to pull off grates? The fact that you had to use something like the cryptographic sequencer seems like you're not being entirely honest about how these gadgets can be used. I gave you a single gadget that has at least 3 different uses in the game.
I can count on one hand the number of times the Asylum's level design meant anything meaningful. And I'm a disembodied light. I don't even have hands.
Asylum's levels encourage you to look around for Riddler trophies, hidden Easter eggs, and various other items such as the Spirits of Arkham logos. This combined with the fantastic atmosphere and well-designed Predator encounters makes me ask, how exactly is this poor level design? It's not on par with The Legend of Zelda or anything like that, but again, exploration isn't a big focus of Arkham Asylum, so that makes sense.
So, why don't we cut this plot up into little pieces and see just how genius Paul Dini really is? Arkham Asylum is a standard Batman vs. villains showdown. It's a classic setup, with each villain defaulting to their most typical motivation. Scarecrow wants to scare hoes, Killer Croc wants to kill your cock, Poison Ivy wants to commit genocide against vegans, and if Cyndi Lauper is a reliable source, the Joker and women have a lot in common. 1, the makeup, and 2, they just want to have fun by taking over the island and terrorizing Gotham. No reason to be beyond being a biatch sounds a hell of a lot like The Dark Knight. And if it works so well there, then why wouldn't it give Asylum the same power? Because it isn't like The Dark Knight. Joker's anarchism was his intellectual point, and he used that to directly challenge Batman's deepest held beliefs, chaos versus order. In Arkham Asylum, there is no point to Joker's chaos. He just does things. Like a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do with one if he actually caught it. This isn't a profound fight for Batman. It's one of 1,000, and that way, it's thematically empty. It doesn't explore ideas in any sense, let alone send a message. It didn't need to, but it was an option, one that it might have been wise to take. What else is there for Asylum to stand on? The premise? And I thought my jokes were bad. Titan. It's a chemical formula Dr. Penelope Young developed from Bane's blood that turns its victims into Gymshark partners. Joker wants them under his command to hold Gotham to ransom. Wow, the cast of fitness flop. Creative. I guess he was a schemer after all. Step 1, get caught. Step 2, rely on Batman being a fucking dipshit. Step 3, immediately escape. Step 4, get the gym candy from Dr. Young. An empty character with no development, no dimension, and hardly any screen time. The only relationship she has is with Bane. To him, she is the Bruja, the witch, for what she did to him. There could have been development, a plot beat about morality, a degree of tension and stakes, but that might require Bane and Young to at any point be in the same room as each other, or Bane to be in the story for more than 5 minutes. Young joins Frank Bowles, Quincy Sharp, and Aaron Cash in the group of completely hollow characters Batman uses to connect small snippets of information. The events key to advancing the mystery include following the forensic trail of insert one-dimensional side character, rescuing them, getting information, moving on. They aren't people, they're cardboard plot devices. A wise choice then, that this band of Muppets is who the story focuses half its attention on. And yet, for the purposes of solving the mystery, these people you spend so much time with are absent to the largest revelations. On multiple occasions, Oracle simply figures out everything for you. Coulda swore a mystery is meant to present all the information to the reader before telling them the answer, not have one of the characters look it up on Bing. Why is Joker after Dr. Young? Yeah, don't worry, Batman. Let me just whip up her browsing history while you spend the next 45 minutes following someone's fucking semen trail. You owe me $5 if they don't end up dead 2 minutes after you meet.
First off, your point about the villains having typical motives is strange, as the story is supposed to be a character study on Batman and the Joker. It isn't a huge story about all of Batman's rogues or whatever. Secondly, Joker's motives isn't just to have fun, as you put it. If you pay attention to the story, you'll realize his motives is to drive Batman insane so he can finally have someone who can understand him.
Here we go. We're gonna have some fun now, kiddies.
You're trying to resist the change. That's not fair. Come on, give in. So, you want to play hardball, bats, do you? Your call. Tickle, tickle. No! Oh, you're ruining my big night! Months of planning down the crapper. I just wanted to bring down your grim facade and for once let you see the world as I see it, giggling in a corner and bleeding. But you've denied me even that. I have nothing to live for.
His entire plan has been to get Batman to experience failure and loss, as well as his greatest fears, so that Joker can finally prove that he and Bruce aren't all that different and are meant for each other. After he sees that his plans failed and Batman won't change, he understands that he truly is alone and has no one who can empathize with him, hence him saying he has nothing left to live for. Thirdly, your point about how the Dark Knight involves Joker challenging Batman applies to Asylum, but instead of Bruce's morals, it's his sanity. This isn't an everyday one-and-done fight for Batman, even ignoring the fact that the only prison holding his enemies is controlled by them. The entire story shows Bruce's struggle with the idea of him being just as insane as his enemies, which is why the last Fear Toxin sequence shows a reversed version of the game's opening. Bruce is afraid that the night in Crime Alley robbed him of the only thing his parents instilled in him, his sanity and his senses of morals. Instead of the tragedy creating a force for good like Bruce wants, how is this just an everyday story? Saying Dr. Young has no dimension shows a lack of attention to the story, or at least to her. Dr. Young wants to make Titan to help the patients of Arkham and is willing to experiment illegally on Bane to do so. But once Joker is revealed that he's going to use it for more nefarious purposes, she does everything in her power to destroy every last bit of her research. How is she not a three-dimensional side character? Also, why does Bane talking to Dr. Young determine if there is or isn't drama or stakes for the characters? Quincy Sharp has an entire backstory and complex motives in the Spirit of Arkham collectibles, similar to the tapes that flesh out many of the villains that you call One Note. Cash is the worst of the examples. Not only does he have a memorable and at times humorous personality, he isn't a main player in the story, and in fact is barely featured in the Arkham games, to the point of being totally absent from Arkham Origins aside from an Easter egg. The side characters aren't at all the main focus of the story, nor did you even try to prove that they are. You also complain that Oracle gives you information and call the story a mystery when it clearly isn't one. The conclusion this section, Arkham Asylum story, isn't at all empty or devoid of character. It's an interesting character study on the Dark Knight and his archenemy that definitely does not rip off a Grant Morrison story at all.
A considerably high absolute depth, or so you may think. The interesting decisions presented here aren't all that interesting. My point being, they add depth, but very little. Time your attacks a little better so you can pick a guy to insta-kill every now and then. It's there, it's present, but I can hardly feel it. They're minor perfections to make in combat. Simplicity doesn't have to be a bad thing, but mastery, the very source of mechanical fun, is paying the price. Bayonetta will take hours to learn how to play well, tens to execute it, but hundreds, if not thousands, to achieve absolute mastery. Flip the coin, however, Batman will take the instant you're shown a mechanic to learn how to play well. About 30 minutes to execute it properly and consistently, and about 10 hours to achieve absolute mastery. The best way to play is evident almost immediately. Free flow, counter at the right time, use special combos well, critical strike. Generally prioritize targets. From there, and for all but prioritization, it's a matter of mastering the button skill required to properly execute. You arrive at a system closer to a consistently intensifying Guitar Hero than Web of Shadows. I'll learn precision, but where are my decisions? Without a breadth of relevant balanced options, shallowness inevitably sets in once you've mastered 9/10 of the system in the first hour, and spent the rest perfecting timing because there is nothing more to learn.
Discussion of depth in combat is always interesting to talk about, and Arkham Asylum has plenty to discuss. The combat rewards proper timing, good enemy types, intelligent decision making, and awareness of one's environment. Besides maybe the special throw, every other attack or move clearly has a use, so what do you mean not enough relevant options? A single minor combat encounter, minor meaning only standard thugs with no special equipment, can have you making more than 10 decisions in a short span of time, all while you're trying to maintain a state of free flow. Mastery of the Arkham games has always been difficult to pull off. Ask anyone who tries to complete challenge maps without breaking their combo. Asylum may be the easiest, but it still requires a lot of skill and practice to play expertly. That being said, comparing it to a game like Bayonetta is ridiculous, as Arkham Asylum has to focus primarily on combat and stealth, with exploration and puzzle solving being sprinkled in. Having combat that's easy to learn doesn't automatically make it shallow. Just because it's not as deep as something like Devil May Cry, which is in the same boat as Bayonetta, doesn't mean it's shallow. Also, saying you don't make the spectacle in Arkham Asylum is silly, as you already admitted that the spectacle is created by keeping up free flow, which is something the player has to do. This is the second and or even third time you have brought up other games that do not compare to Arkham Asylum, that are in different genres. Absolutely ridiculous, dude.
It's playing well. When you've knocked every enemy down, your only option becomes ground pound. But unlike Arkham Knight, that attack isn't blessed with a range boost from a high combo. So what if there's no enemy nearby? Answer: you break free flow. You've achieved the extrinsic goal. You beat up the bad guys. But in doing so perfectly, you killed the intrinsic one. Far too often did I stop myself from playing my quickest because I knew having the entire playing field knocked down would risk breaking my combo, losing my special takedown, and stopping the spectacle in its tracks. Losing a combo doesn't have to be a stab in the gut for the player's fantasy. Ominously walking towards your next target can look just great, but it's certainly going to hurt your XP, a major problem in the challenge mode, and it will ultimately impact your likelihood of victory.
So you complain about learning the timing of ground pounding and knocking all the enemies down so you wouldn't lose your combo, even though that is another level of skill and planning. Also, if you do hit all the enemies down, just roll around and then the thugs will start getting up before you lose your combo. So I don't really see what the problem with this exactly is. Your footage shows you just messing up and it all being your fault.
In 2009, this industry showed us that it's full of people ready to believe in this genre. It was the most critically acclaimed superhero game ever made until only its sequel. It is gilded, rendered in marble, and stands valiantly in the hall of video game legend. I do not believe the experience that is Arkham Asylum can live up to that reverence today, but perhaps that's only a testament to its greatness. It wasn't the game the superhero genre deserved, but it was the one it needed all those years ago. If The Dark Knight was a symbol meant to inspire, then Arkham Asylum isn't the best Batman game ever made, but it is the greatest. Thank you for watching.
For my conclusion, I think you completely failed to prove that this game is overrated or shouldn't get the praise that it deserves. The game has a fantastic story that delves into the character of both Batman and the Joker and their relationship in a fairly fresh and interesting way, has fantastic stealth with in-depth decision-making and tons of strategies and plans. Watch my YouTube videos just to figure out how much you can do in just the stealth alone. Has in-depth, very well-done combat that is extremely revolutionary, especially during the time, and has a fairly decent exploration system to keep you engaged until the campaign ends. The only thing I would agree with you on is if it came out today, it would get the same amount of reverence because of the fact of games like Arkham City, Knight, Origins, or maybe even Spider-Man PS4, but that only exists, these games only exist because of the game Batman Arkham Asylum in the first place. But that being said, compared to most video games out today, I think it completely squishes the competition. Nobody's gonna start acting like Gotham Knights is a better video game than Arkham Asylum, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, Unity, I know you love that one, Whitelight.
Assassin's Creed Unity is underrated.
Or any of these other games. Even more modern games seem to not be holding up to Arkham Asylum besides, you know, a few exceptions. That being said, I'd like to thank Paragon for helping me write this script up. I hope you guys enjoyed this response. Have a nice day, guys. See you around.